I guess if we had to give a quick summary of Vedanta, what is Vedanta, and what are the, I guess, the schools in summary?
Vedanta has three basic meanings, and so we first have to distinguish the three senses of Vedanta. So the first meaning is just the Upanishads. That's the most fundamental meaning of the Vedanta. Because Vedanta means literally it's a combination of two words, Veda and Anta. Anta means end or culmination. So the Upanishads are the textual and philosophical and spiritual culmination of the Vedas. It's part of the Vedas. The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, but they're considered to be the culminating portion of the Vedas. And that's the primary meaning of Vedanta. Second meaning is slightly broader. It's the Prasthana Traya, which means the three scriptural pillars of Vedanta, which starts with the Upanishads, but includes also the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutra. The third meaning of Vedanta, so you see how it gets confusing, because a lot of people use the term Vedanta, but often I find that they're not clear about what sense they're using it in. The third sense of Vedanta is it can refer to any one of the many philosophical schools of Vedanta. And one of the most common mistakes I find people make is to equate Vedanta with Shankara's school of Advaita Vedanta. And I think that's a serious mistake. It's deeply misleading. In terms of philosophical schools, there are many, and it really would just take me too far afield and take too much time to explain all the doctrines of the different schools. But in a very brief summary, what I'd say is there's Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, which, as I already mentioned, holds that the ultimate reality is nirguna or nirvishesha, which means devoid of all attributes. And so, a more positive way of putting the same thing is it's strictly non-dual pure consciousness, but it does not have ultimately Brahman is not the personal God and doesn't have the attributes of the personal God, not omniscient, not omnipotent, not the creator of this world, because there is no world even ultimately. Um, and then, so that's Shankara's view. But the majority of schools, the other schools of Vedanta, the majority, not all of the other ones, but most of the other ones, are what are called bhakti schools of Vedanta. And in fact, Swami Tapasanji has written an entire book called Bhakti Schools of Vedanta to kind of redress the imbalance in scholarship, in even popular thinking about Vedanta, that Shankara's Advaita Vedanta has a monopoly on Vedanta. He wrote an entire book explaining in detail the doctrines of the different Bhakti schools of Vedanta, including Ramanuja's Vishtadvaita Vedanta, Madhva's, people like to call it, or tend to call it Dvaita Vedanta, the school of dualism, but that's not what he called it. And so I prefer to call it Madhva Vedanta, which just means the school of Madhva. But there's also Vallabha Shuddha Dvaita Vedanta, which means the pure non-dualism of Vallabha. And the list goes on. And I can't possibly go into all the details, but the basic idea, as I said, is that these are all bhakti schools, which means that they believe in the ultimate reality of the personal God, unlike Shankara's school of Advaita Vedanta. Some of them also accept Nirguna Brahman. Especially Chaitanya's Achinta Bheda Veda school of Vedanta and Vallabha's school of Shuddha Advaita Vedanta, they accept the highest reality of Krishna, the personal God, but they say that Nirguna Brahman, which Shankara and his followers are so obsessed with, is also real. It's just a minor aspect of Krishna. It's the Tanubha or the Pratibha of Krishna himself. So there's still a hierarchy in place. Um, and they also, these bhakti schools of Vedanta take the world to be real. Um, and that's another fundamental difference between Shankara school and these bhakti schools. And what they claim is that the world is real, but is dependent for its existence on God, on the personal God. But just because it's dependent on God for its existence doesn't make it unreal. And so I can go on explaining, and there are also major differences in terms of spiritual practice, what the highest spiritual practice is. Lo and behold, you won't be surprised to learn that the Bhakti schools of Vedanta hold that Bhakti Yoga is the highest spiritual practice, the yoga of devotion toward a personal God. Whereas Shankara held that Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, is the highest spiritual path, and that Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga are not useless, but they're helpful for inferior spiritual aspirants to develop sufficient purity of mind to become eligible to practice the higher spiritual practice of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. And then alone you can reach the highest goal, which is liberation.